The tycoon offered her two unfair choices. The waitress revealed the third answer he never considered. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. There was a time when Emily thought that working at a fancy restaurant in Manhattan would lead to something more. She had big dreams, but life had a way of testing those dreams with each passing day. She had been a waitress for years, dealing with demanding customers, working long shifts, and scraping by. But she never gave up. She never gave in to the idea that this would be her life forever. Then, everything changed one fateful evening when a man walked into the restaurant. He was a tycoon, a billionaire businessman known for his ruthless ways. His name was Richard Langston, and he had a reputation for making deals that no one could refuse. Emily had seen him before, on the covers of magazines, in the news. But she never imagined that she would be face to face with him. He sat down at a corner table, his suit perfectly tailored, his gaze sharp as he scanned the room. He wasn't interested in the restaurant's ambience or the food. He was interested in one thing: power. Emily had been serving at the restaurant for a while now, and she knew how to handle demanding customers. But Richard Langston was different. He wasn't like the others who came and went. His presence commanded attention, and she felt it as soon as she approached his table. "I'll have the steak, medium rare, and a glass of your finest red wine," he said, barely looking up from his phone. She nodded and took his order, but something about his demeanor caught her off guard. He wasn't just another rich businessman. He had an air of superiority, as if he were testing her, waiting for her to make a mistake. When she brought him his meal, he didn't acknowledge her at first. Instead, he stared at the steak with a critical eye, as if he were inspecting it for flaws. Finally, he looked up at her. "You're not from here, are you?" he asked, his voice cold and calculating. "No, sir. I'm from a small town upstate," Emily replied, trying to remain composed. "A small-town girl in the big city. How quaint." He smirked, clearly enjoying the power he held over her. Emily wasn't sure where this was going, but she knew it wasn't going to end well. "I'll tell you what," Richard continued, his gaze narrowing. "I'll give you two choices. You can quit your job here and come work for me. I'll pay you 10 times what you make now, and you'll have everything you've ever dreamed of. Or," he paused for effect, "you can stay here and keep living this life, working for pennies while I get richer." Emily felt her stomach churn. She had never been one to back down, but this was different. This man was offering her a way out, a way to live the life she had always dreamed of. But at what cost? Her dignity? Her independence? "I'm afraid I can't accept either of those offers, Mr. Langston," she said, surprising herself with her own words. He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "And why is that?" "Because I don't need your money to be happy," Emily replied, her voice steady. "And I don't need to sell myself to anyone to prove my worth." For a moment, there was silence between them. Richard looked at her as if he were sizing her up, trying to determine if she was bluffing. But Emily didn't flinch. She had a third option in mind, one that he had never considered. "You see," she said slowly, "I'm not looking for someone else to save me. I'm saving myself." Richard's smirk faded, replaced by a look of genuine curiosity. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "And how do you plan on doing that?" "By doing what I've always wanted," Emily replied. "I'm going to start my own business. A company that stands for something. Not just profit, but purpose. And I'm going to build it from the ground up." Richard sat there, staring at her, his mind racing. He had expected her to crumble under pressure, to take the easy way out. But instead, she had done something he hadn't anticipated. She had refused to play his game. "You're a bold one," he said finally. "I didn't expect that." Emily smiled, knowing that she had just made her choice. She hadn't needed his approval or his money to move forward. She was already on her way to something greater. And that was the one thing Richard Langston had never considered. Emily walked away from the table, her heart still pounding in her chest. She had never thought she would find herself in such a situation. A billionaire tycoon, offering her two choices that seemed almost impossible to resist. But she had done it. She had turned down the easy path and chose to keep her dignity. As she made her way back to the kitchen, she couldn't help but wonder if she had made the right decision. The weight of her words echoed in her mind. I'm saving myself. It wasn't just a rejection of his offer. It was a rejection of everything she had been taught about success. She had always believed that money and power were the keys to happiness. But now, she was beginning to realize that true fulfillment came from something deeper. A few minutes later, Richard Langston's voice cut through her thoughts as he called out to her from the other side of the room. Emily. She stopped in her tracks. She had never expected him to say her name. He had barely noticed her before. Can I speak with you for a moment? He asked, his tone softer now, almost curious. Emily took a deep breath and turned back towards him. She didn't know what to expect, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She walked over to his table, keeping her composure. Yes, Mr. Langston? She asked, her voice steady. I've been thinking about what you said, Richard said, his eyes studying her with an intensity she hadn't seen before. I wasn't expecting you to refuse both offers. It's not often that someone challenges me like that. Emily didn't know how to respond. She didn't need his approval, but she could see that he was genuinely intrigued by her. I don't need your approval, Mr. Langston, she said, surprising even herself with how confident she sounded. I'm not here to play your game. I'm here to build something real, something that stands for more than just money. Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. He was quiet for a moment, as if considering her words carefully. Finally, he spoke. What if I told you that I could help you build that business? What if I offered you something more than just money, something that could make your vision a reality? Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never expected him to offer her help. She had assumed that he would try to manipulate her into working for him. But this was different. His tone wasn't condescending or demanding. It was genuine. I don't want your money, Mr. Langston, she said firmly. I want my independence. Richard nodded, as if he understood. I get it. But what if I could help you in other ways? What if I could connect you with people who could support your business, people who share your values? Emily hesitated. She wasn't sure what his intentions were, but part of her couldn't help but be intrigued. She had been struggling to make ends meet for so long. The idea of having access to the right people, the right resources, was tempting. But she had to stay true to her vision. I don't want to compromise my values, she said quietly. Richard leaned forward, his gaze intense. You don't have to. I'm not asking you to change your values, Emily. I'm asking you to trust me. I see something in you, something I don't see in most people. You have the drive, the passion, the vision. All I'm offering is the opportunity to make it happen. Emily looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of manipulation. But all she saw was sincerity. It was almost too good to be true. I don't know, she said, her voice uncertain. I've worked so hard to get here, and I don't want to risk losing everything just for a chance at something bigger. Richard smiled, a small but genuine smile. You won't lose everything. You'll gain more than you ever imagined. But it's up to you, Emily. The choice is yours. Emily stood there, her mind racing. She had spent so long trying to figure out what success really meant. She had always believed that it was about wealth, power, and connections. But now, as she stood in front of Richard Langston, she realized that success wasn't about those things. It was about staying true to herself and her vision. And maybe, just maybe, she could make her dreams a reality without compromising who she was. I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice steady. Richard nodded, his expression softening. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Emily turned and walked away, her mind still spinning. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control. She wasn't going to let anyone tell her what she could or couldn't do. She was going to build something that mattered, something that would make a difference. And maybe, just maybe, she would do it with Richard Langston's help. But the decision, the power, would always remain in her hands. Emily spent the next few days torn between her ambition and the idea of accepting Richard's offer. He had given her an opportunity that most people could only dream of: connections, resources, and a chance to grow her business. But at what cost? She didn't want to risk losing herself in the process. She had fought too hard to make it this far on her own. She had spent countless hours reading, learning, and growing, and she wasn't willing to throw that all away for a shortcut. But the truth was, her dream of starting her own business had been a lonely one, and now, here was someone offering to help. The question that kept running through her mind was, could she trust him? Richard had always been an enigma to her. On the one hand, he was incredibly powerful, someone who could make or break careers in an instant. On the other, there was something about the way he spoke to her that made her feel as though he saw more than just a waitress. He saw her potential. Over the next few days, Richard's offer stayed with her. It gnawed at her. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Every time she walked into the restaurant, every time she poured drinks for the guests, she felt like she was settling. This was not what she was meant to do. She had a bigger purpose, and maybe, just maybe, Richard could help her get there. But she had to be careful. She knew too many people who had lost themselves in the pursuit of power. She wasn't going to be one of them. One evening, as she was closing up the restaurant, she received a text from Richard. It was simple, but it stopped her in her tracks. "Let's meet. I think it's time we talk." She stared at the message for a moment, her heart racing. This was it, the moment of truth. She had been avoiding this conversation, but now she couldn't put it off any longer. Was she ready to take the leap? Was she ready to trust him? She took a deep breath and replied, "I'll meet you tomorrow." The next afternoon, she met Richard at a small cafe near his office. He was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking as polished and put together as ever. As soon as he saw her, he smiled and stood up to greet her. "Emily, I'm glad you came," he said, his voice warm and inviting. She smiled back, but she couldn't shake the feeling of uncertainty. This was the moment that would determine her future. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Richard began, as they both sat down. "And I understand why you're hesitant. But I want to be clear with you. I'm not trying to control you or your vision. I'm offering you a partnership, a chance to make your business grow, without compromising who you are." Emily studied him carefully, weighing his words. She had heard promises like this before, but they had always come with strings attached. Was this different? "And what do you want in return?" she asked, not wanting to leave any room for misunderstanding. Richard leaned forward, his eyes focused. "I want to help you succeed, but I also want to make sure that the vision you have for your company stays true. I'm not interested in taking over. I want to support you." Emily felt a flicker of hope. It was exactly what she needed to hear, but she couldn't just take his word for it. She needed to know more. "How exactly do you plan on supporting me?" she asked, her voice steady. Richard smiled, as if he had been expecting the question. "I have connections, resources, and knowledge that you don't have access to yet. I can introduce you to people who can help you with the financial side of things, the marketing side, the legal side. You don't have to do this alone." She was silent for a moment, letting the weight of his offer sink in. The idea of having support, real support, was tempting. It was more than she could have imagined. But there was a part of her that still hesitated. "I don't want to lose my independence," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "I've worked too hard to get here, and I don't want to give up everything I've built for a shortcut." Richard nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I get it. And that's why I'm offering you a partnership, not a takeover. You'll still be in control. I'll be your ally, not your boss." Emily felt the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to feel hopeful. This could be the opportunity she had been waiting for. "And if I say yes?" she asked, her voice quiet but sure. "Then we start building," Richard replied, his smile widening. "We build something great together." The decision was made. Emily wasn't going to do it alone anymore. She was ready to take the next step. She would trust Richard, but only on her terms. She had her vision, and now she had someone who could help her make it a reality. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was finally on the right path. Emily sat at her small desk in the corner of her apartment, staring at the screen. The cursor blinked back at her as if waiting for her to make the next move. She had made the decision, but now came the hard part, executing her plan. Richard's offer had been tempting, and she had agreed to move forward. They had met several times over the past week, discussing her vision, setting up meetings, and strategizing. She couldn't deny that the opportunities he provided were valuable. His network of influential people and his expertise in business had already proven to be a game changer. But as she sat there, her fingers poised over the keyboard, doubts crept in. Was she still in control of her business? Or was she slowly losing herself in Richard's world? Every step she took felt like a balancing act, walking the line between independence and partnership. The sound of a knock at the door broke her concentration. She stood up, walked to the door, and opened it to find Richard standing there, his usual confident smile in place. "We need to talk," he said. "Come on in," Emily replied, stepping aside. Richard walked into her apartment, looking around at the modest surroundings. "You've got a lot of work ahead of you," he said, taking a seat on the couch. Emily nodded. "I know, but I'm ready." "I don't doubt that," Richard said, his tone softer than usual. "But there's something I want you to consider." Emily sat down across from him, waiting. "You've made it clear that you want to keep control of your business, and I respect that. But you're also going to need help. You can't do it all on your own, no matter how much you want to." "I know that," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't let anyone take over. Not even you." Richard smiled, his eyes reflecting a hint of understanding. "I never said I was going to take over. I'm just offering support." He paused before continuing. "There's something else I need to tell you. I've been talking to some of my contacts, and there's an opportunity that could help you get your business off the ground much faster. But it's going to come with a price." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear what he was about to say. "What kind of price?" she asked, her voice cautious. Richard leaned forward, his gaze intense. "I'm offering you access to a major investor. Someone who could provide the capital you need to expand your business rapidly. They're interested in what you're doing, but they won't invest unless you make certain compromises." Emily's stomach dropped. She had worked so hard to get this far, and now it felt like everything was on the line. "What kind of compromises?" she asked, her voice tight with uncertainty. "They want you to give up some control," Richard said. "They want a say in the direction of the company, in exchange for their financial backing." Emily's mind raced. This was the moment she had feared. She had always known that investors would want something in return, but she hadn't imagined it would be control. "I can't do that," she said firmly. "I won't give up control of my business." Richard's expression softened, but there was a glint of something in his eyes. "I understand. But let me ask. What's more important to you? Your independence, or the success of your business?" Emily swallowed hard. It was a question she had asked herself many times. She had always believed that success was about staying true to her values, but now she was facing the reality of what it would take to succeed. "I don't know," she admitted quietly, "but I can't sacrifice my vision. Not for anyone." Richard nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I get it. But sometimes, the price of success isn't what we expect. You have to decide whether you're willing to pay it." Emily sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had worked so hard to get here, and now everything was on the line. She had always dreamed of building something that mattered, something that would make a difference in the world. But was she willing to compromise her values to make that happen? The thought made her stomach churn. She didn't have an answer yet, but one thing was clear. She couldn't afford to make this decision lightly. Richard stood up, his smile returning. "Take your time to think about it. I'll be here when you're ready." As he left, Emily sat in the silence of her apartment, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had come so far, but the road ahead was uncertain. Would she give in to the pressure, or would she find a way to make her vision a reality without losing herself in the process? Emily spent the next few days in a haze, her mind constantly returning to Richard's offer. It felt like she was at a crossroads, each path leading her somewhere she wasn't sure she wanted to go. She had always prided herself on being self-sufficient, on doing things her way. But now, with Richard's help on the table, the possibility of expanding her business seemed so close, yet it felt like a trap. The idea of giving up control, even in the slightest way, unsettled her. She had always been determined to carve her own path, but the world of business wasn't so simple. It was about connections, about getting the right people on your side. And Richard, with all his connections and wealth, could give her everything she needed to make her business soar. But at what cost? She had to make a decision, and soon. On the evening of the 5th day after their meeting, Richard called her. His voice was calm, reassuring, but there was an edge to it that made Emily tense up. "Emily, I understand that you're weighing your options," he said. "But I need to know what you're thinking. Time is moving fast, and we can't afford to delay." Emily sat at her kitchen table, staring out the window as she listened. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the city. It was beautiful, peaceful, and yet her mind was anything but. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm still not sure. I can't just give up everything I've worked for, Richard. My independence means everything to me." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "I get it, Emily," Richard replied, his tone softening. "But I'm not asking you to give up your independence. I'm asking you to let me help you. Think of it as a partnership, not a takeover." You'll still be the one making the decisions, but with the right support behind you. Emily sighed, running a hand through her hair. I want to believe you, she said. But there's always a catch. There always is. Richard's voice grew more insistent. There's no catch, Emily. I'm offering you the opportunity to build something that will last. Something that will stand the test of time. But you can't do it alone. You need the right resources, the right team, the right people to back you up. And I'm offering you all of that. Emily closed her eyes, imagining the future she could have. She could build the business she had always dreamed of, one that didn't just make money, but made a difference. But that dream had always felt so far away. And now, Richard was offering her a chance to make it happen faster than she had ever imagined. But was it worth it? Was she willing to compromise her values for success? What if I don't take your offer? Emily asked quietly. What if I continue doing this on my own? Then you'll keep struggling, Richard replied, his voice blunt but not unkind. You'll keep working hard, but the progress will be slow. You'll face more obstacles than you need to. And you'll always be just one step away from something bigger, something better. Emily felt her heart race. The truth was, she had been struggling. She had been doing everything on her own for so long, and the weight of it was beginning to wear on her. The restaurant was barely breaking even, and the bills were piling up. She had a vision, but she couldn't make it happen alone. I don't want to struggle anymore, she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I want to build something that matters. Then let me help you, Richard said, his voice steady and reassuring. We can make this work. You just have to trust me. Emily stood up, her mind racing. She had always believed that the best way to succeed was to do it on her own. But now, faced with the reality of her situation, she wasn't so sure. She could keep pushing forward, struggling every day, or she could take Richard's offer and have the support she needed to make her dream a reality. I'm scared, she admitted, the words tasting foreign on her tongue. I'm scared of losing myself, of losing my vision. You won't lose yourself, Emily, Richard said gently. Your vision is yours, and I respect that. I'm not asking you to change. I'm asking you to let me help you get there faster. Emily looked out the window again, the setting sun now casting long shadows across the city. She had always dreamed of building something great, something that would leave a legacy, but she couldn't do it alone. She had to admit that. And so, after a long pause, she made her decision. Okay, she said softly. I'll take your offer, but on my terms. Richard's voice lit up with relief. Of course, whatever you need. We'll do this together, but on your terms. Emily smiled, the weight on her shoulders lifting just a little. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was on the right path. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she had made the choice. She was no longer alone. The next few weeks flew by in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and planning sessions. Emily found herself juggling her job at the restaurant while trying to lay the foundation for her business. Richard had kept his word, introducing her to key players in the industry who could help her. Slowly but surely, the pieces of her vision were starting to come together. But it wasn't easy. There were moments when she questioned everything, moments when she felt overwhelmed by the weight of the decisions she was making. And there were times when she doubted whether she was doing the right thing. She was still unsure about how much control she was willing to give up, even with Richard's promise that he would be there as a partner, not a boss. The more she worked on her business, the more she realized that this wasn't just about building a company. It was about finding a balance between her dreams and her reality. She wanted to create something that would make a difference, but she didn't want to lose herself in the process. One evening, as she was finishing her shift at the restaurant, she received a call from Richard. We need to talk, he said. It's about the next step. Emily's heart raced. She had grown accustomed to his calls, but this one felt different. She could hear the urgency in his voice. What's going on? She asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. I've arranged a meeting with a potential investor, Richard said. Someone who could take your business to the next level. But there's a catch. They want you to make some changes to your plan. Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she was ready. What kind of changes? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. They want more control over the direction of your company, Richard replied. They're willing to invest a significant amount of money, but they want to be involved in the decision-making process. I know this wasn't part of the deal we discussed, But this is the opportunity we've been working toward. Emily's mind raced. She had always known that taking on investors meant compromises, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. I don't know, she said softly. I don't want to give up control. Not now. I understand, Richard said, his tone softening. But this is a huge opportunity, Emily. It could be the break you need to make your business a success. You've worked so hard for this, and I don't want you to miss out because of pride or fear. Emily sat down at the kitchen table, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had worked so hard to get to this point, but was it worth sacrificing her vision for the chance to grow faster? Was she willing to make the compromises that came with success? Richard's words echoed in her mind. Pride or fear? She had always prided herself on being independent, but was it worth it if it meant staying stagnant? I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not making any decisions until I'm sure. Take your time, Richard replied. But remember, sometimes opportunities like this don't come around twice. She ended the call, but the conversation lingered in her mind long after the phone had gone silent. Emily had always known that success required sacrifice, but now, standing at the edge of her dream, she was forced to confront the reality of what that sacrifice might look like. She couldn't do this alone, but did she have to give up everything she believed in to succeed? The next morning, Emily woke up early, as she always did. The restaurant was buzzing with activity, and as she moved through the familiar motions of her shift, she couldn't help but feel the weight of her decision pressing down on her. She had a choice to make, and it wasn't an easy one. Her mind kept returning to Richard's offer. She had never been one to take the easy way out, but now she was faced with a choice that could define the rest of her life. That night, after her shift, she sat down at her small desk again, the weight of the decision heavy in her chest. The words pride or fear echoed in her mind, and she realized something. She wasn't afraid of taking risks. She had always taken risks, always pushed herself to be better, but she was afraid of losing herself in the process. She was afraid of becoming someone she didn't recognize. As the night wore on, Emily knew that the decision had to be made. She couldn't stay in this limbo forever. She needed to move forward, but on her terms. Richard had promised her a partnership, not a takeover. She would hold on to her vision, but she would need help. And maybe that was okay. Maybe the only way to build something that mattered was to be willing to accept help when it was offered. The next morning, Emily called Richard. I've made my decision, she said, her voice steady. I'm willing to work with the investor, but only if we stick to the original plan. I'll remain in control of the company, and I'll decide the direction we take. I'm not giving up my vision. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then Richard spoke. You've made the right choice, Emily. I knew you would. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. Emily dove into her work with renewed determination, putting her decision to partner with the investor into motion. The deal was set, and the initial stages of her business's expansion were underway. She had insisted on staying in control, and Richard had respected that. The investor, while still a bit hesitant about her firm stance, had agreed to the terms. It was a huge leap forward, but Emily felt a sense of relief now that everything was finally moving in the right direction. Yet, as much as she was focused on building her dream, there were moments of doubt that crept into her mind. Was she truly ready for the responsibility that came with this opportunity? What if she lost herself in the process? She had to keep reminding herself that this was her vision, her company. No one would take that from her. But still, the pressure weighed on her. Richard had become more of a mentor than she had ever expected. He wasn't just a businessman who saw her as a project. He had become someone she could trust. Their meetings were frequent, but the dynamic had shifted. Instead of being the powerful tycoon pulling the strings, Richard had allowed Emily to make the decisions. She was building the team, overseeing every detail, and calling the shots. There were setbacks, of course. No business venture ever went smoothly. But each challenge only fueled her desire to keep pushing forward. One day, after a particularly frustrating meeting with her new investors, Emily found herself sitting alone at the small desk in her apartment, staring at the documents that sprawled across her workspace. The pressure was mounting. She needed more than just capital. She needed people who truly understood her vision, people who believed in the mission she was building. She glanced at her phone, unsure if she should reach out to Richard or give herself more time to think. Finally, she decided to call him. Richard, we need to talk, she said, her voice sounding more strained than she intended. "What's going on, Emily?" Richard replied, his tone always calm and steady. "I'm not sure I can keep doing this on my own. The investors, they're pushing me in directions I don't want to go. I feel like I'm losing sight of why I started all this in the first place." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, Richard spoke, his voice softer now. "I understand. But you've come this far, Emily. You have something that the world needs to see. You're not in this alone, and I'm not going anywhere." His words were a balm for her frustrated soul. "But what if they don't understand?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they only care about the money?" "Then it's your job to make them see the bigger picture," Richard replied. "You've always been about more than just profit, Emily. That's why this is working. Don't forget that." She took a deep breath, the weight of his words grounding her. "I won't," she said firmly. "But I need to start trusting my instincts again. I need to take back some control." Richard chuckled lightly. "That's the Emily I know. Trust yourself. You've got this." The reassurance from Richard was all she needed. The next morning, she made some tough decisions. She restructured the business's direction, cutting ties with investors who didn't share her vision. It was a risky move, but Emily knew it was the right one. She needed people who would support her, not just for the money she brought to the table, but for the heart and soul of her company. As the days turned into weeks, Emily could feel the weight of her decisions starting to lift. She was finally finding her stride, pushing past the doubts and fears that had clouded her earlier. Her business began to grow at a steady pace. She focused on building a strong foundation, surrounding herself with the right team who shared her values. The investors who had remained were supportive of her choices, and as her brand grew, so did their trust in her. Richard remained by her side, a constant source of wisdom and encouragement. They met regularly, and though he never took over, his advice was invaluable. It wasn't long before Emily's business became a name people recognized. She had done it. She had built something that was hers, something that mattered. Her company wasn't just about profit, it was about purpose. And that was exactly what she had always wanted. As she stood in her office one evening, looking out at the city skyline, Emily knew she had made the right choice. She had stayed true to her vision, and in doing so, she had found success on her terms. She wasn't just another entrepreneur chasing money. She was a woman who had built something meaningful. And as she thought about the journey ahead, she knew this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but Emily was ready. She had learned that success wasn't about playing the game the way others expected her to. It was about staying true to herself and her vision. She wasn't done yet. She was just getting started. Months passed, and Emily's business began to grow steadily. She had made the tough decisions, and now she was seeing the results. The team she had assembled was strong, united in their shared vision. They were all invested in the success of the company, not just for the paycheck, but because they believed in what Emily was building. But even as the company flourished, there was still a part of Emily that felt uneasy. She had learned to trust her instincts, but there were moments when the weight of responsibility would press on her chest. Was she making the right decisions? Was she losing sight of the values that had driven her in the first place? One morning, Emily sat in her office, looking over the financial reports that had just come in. The numbers were good, better than she had expected, in fact, but the pressure of maintaining that success loomed over her. She glanced out the window, watching the hustle and bustle of the city below. It was a world of constant motion, and sometimes it felt like she was running just to keep up. A knock on the door broke her concentration. "Come in," she called. Richard walked in, his usual confident stride carrying him across the room. He had been a steady presence in her life, offering advice when needed but never overstepping. She trusted him, but today she needed to talk. "How's everything going?" Richard asked, taking a seat across from her. "Good," Emily replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "The business is growing. I'm just trying to keep up." "I can see that," Richard said, nodding toward the piles of paperwork on her desk. "But I can also see that you're not happy. What's really going on?" Emily sighed, leaning back in her chair. "It's all so much. The pressure, the decisions, the constant need to push forward. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it." Richard studied her for a moment, then spoke quietly. "It's easy to get lost in the numbers, Emily. But remember why you started this. It wasn't just about success or money. It was about building something that mattered." Emily nodded, but the doubt still lingered. "I know, but sometimes I feel like I'm losing myself in the process." I'm so focused on growing the business that I forget why I started in the first place. Richard smiled, the kind of smile that always made her feel like he truly understood. The reason you started hasn't changed. You just need to take a step back and remember why you're doing this. You've built something real, something that matters. But don't forget about yourself in the process. Emily felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Richard was right. She had lost sight of her original purpose. She had been so focused on the business side of things that she had forgotten why she started. This was never just about the money or the growth. It was about making a difference, about building something that had meaning. Thank you, she said, her voice soft. I needed to hear that. Richard stood up, giving her a reassuring smile. Anytime. Just don't lose sight of the bigger picture. As he left, Emily sat in silence for a moment, letting his words sink in. She had come so far, but she had to remember why she started. It wasn't just about building a successful business. It was about creating something that would leave a lasting impact. The next few weeks were a time of reflection for Emily. She reconnected with the purpose that had driven her from the beginning. She made some changes in her approach, focusing less on the numbers and more on the values that had inspired her. She started taking more time for herself, finding balance between work and personal life. And as she did, the business continued to grow, but it felt different now. It felt like something she could be proud of, not just because it was successful, but because it was aligned with her values. One evening, as she sat at her desk looking over the latest round of reports, Emily smiled. The business was thriving, but so was she. She had learned to trust herself, to balance the demands of success with the importance of staying true to her vision. She wasn't just building a business. She was building a legacy, and she was doing it on her own terms. Richard had been right. Success wasn't just about the destination. It was about staying true to yourself along the way. Emily wasn't just a businesswoman now. She was someone who had learned to navigate the complexities of success while staying grounded in what mattered most. She was exactly where she needed to be. And with each passing day, she became more and more confident that this was just the beginning of something even bigger. The weeks that followed were a turning point for Emily. As the business continued to grow, she found herself grappling with the dual challenge of scaling up while keeping the core of her vision intact. The pressure of managing investors, employees, and the constant push to stay ahead of the competition had started to weigh on her. Despite the success, she found herself questioning whether it was all worth it. Was this the life she had dreamed of? Or had she become lost in the pursuit of success, sacrificing her personal life and the values that had initially motivated her? Richard had continued to be a source of support, guiding her through the more complex decisions. But now, even his reassurance couldn't silence the doubt creeping into her mind. She sat in her office one late evening, alone, reviewing financial reports for the 100th time. The numbers were great, better than she could have imagined, but something didn't feel right. Her schedule was packed, her days blurred together, and she rarely had time for herself anymore. She had been so focused on expanding the business, on meeting deadlines, that she had almost forgotten what it was like to simply breathe. The phone buzzed on her desk, breaking the silence. It was a message from Richard. "We need to talk. I have something important to discuss." Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. She knew that conversation was inevitable. She had been avoiding it, but now, it seemed like time was up. She texted him back, agreeing to meet. The next day, they sat across from each other in the same cafe where they had had their first real conversation. Emily's heart was heavy with uncertainty as she took a sip of her coffee. Richard studied her carefully, as if he could read her mind. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "You've been questioning everything, haven't you?" Emily didn't respond immediately. She just stared at her coffee, unsure of how to put her thoughts into words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than she had intended. "I've been so focused on the business that I feel like I'm losing myself. I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore, Richard. This isn't what I thought it would be. I thought I was building something meaningful, but now it feels like I'm just chasing numbers." Richard leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest. "I can see how you'd feel that way. You've achieved success, but you've been running on autopilot, haven't you? You've been so busy trying to prove yourself that you've lost sight of what really matters." Emily nodded slowly, a lump forming in her throat. She had worked so hard to build something from nothing, but now, as she sat there, she realized that she had been chasing the wrong thing. "I've been so afraid of failing," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I thought if I could just make the business work, then everything else would fall into place. But now I'm not sure it's worth it." Richard's expression softened. "Emily, success isn't just about making money or growing a business. It's about living a life that's true to who you are. If you keep sacrificing your well-being, your happiness, just for the sake of success, then what's the point? The business won't mean anything if you lose yourself in the process." Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had been so focused on the destination that she had forgotten about the journey. She had built a successful business, but she had lost her sense of self along the way. She had forgotten why she started this in the first place. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice small. "You need to find balance," Richard said, his voice steady. "You can't keep running yourself into the ground. You need to take a step back, reassess your priorities, and figure out what you really want. You've built something amazing, but it's not worth it if you're miserable." Emily wiped her eyes and nodded. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew Richard was right. She had spent so much time focusing on external success that she had neglected her own well-being. It was time to reconnect with her purpose and rebuild her life on her own terms. As the days passed, Emily made changes. She delegated more of the day-to-day operations of the business to her trusted team, allowing herself more time to focus on the bigger picture. She started to take time for herself again, rediscovering the things she loved: reading, hiking, and spending time with friends. The more she focused on her own happiness, the more she realized that her business could thrive without her sacrificing everything in the process. She could be a successful entrepreneur and still live a fulfilling life. Over time, Emily found a new rhythm. She remained dedicated to her vision, but she no longer felt overwhelmed by the constant need to prove herself. She had learned that success wasn't about doing everything on her own. It was about building the right team, trusting others, and finding balance. One evening, as she walked through the city, her mind clear and her heart light, Emily realized that she had finally found peace. She had created something meaningful, but more importantly, she had created a life that she was proud of, a life that was true to who she was. Emily sat in her office late into the evening, staring out the window at the twinkling lights of the city. It was a moment of quiet after a busy week of planning, meeting with potential partners, and overseeing new projects for the business. Things were moving fast, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was truly in control. The balance she had been striving for was finally coming together. The business was thriving, but more importantly, so was she. She had made the decision to prioritize her well-being, and it was paying off. The pressure she had once felt was still there, but it didn't overwhelm her anymore. Her heart wasn't racing with anxiety every time she walked into the office. She had found her rhythm. But even as she felt the joy of having everything fall into place, there was one lingering thought that wouldn't go away. Richard's words echoed in her mind. "You can't lose sight of why you started this." She had been so focused on her own success and on building a business that she had almost forgotten what had driven her in the first place. It wasn't about making money or becoming famous. It was about creating something meaningful. She wanted to make a difference, and now that her business was growing, it was time to refocus on her original purpose. One morning, as she sat at her desk reviewing the latest round of plans for the next phase of the business, Emily made a decision. It was time to give back. She had the platform, the resources, and the connections to make a real impact, and she couldn't keep it to herself. Emily had always dreamed of building something that didn't just benefit her, but also the community. The thought of being able to help others had always been in the back of her mind, but now, she was ready to take action. She started drafting plans for a charitable arm of her business, something that would not only align with her values, but also provide a meaningful way for her business to contribute to causes that mattered. Her first initiative would be focused on helping young women who were starting their own businesses, providing them with mentorship and financial support to get off the ground. Emily knew how hard it was to get started with nothing, and she wanted to make it easier for others. As she worked on the details, her heart swelled with a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just a business owner. She was someone who could make a real difference. The first meeting to discuss her vision for the new initiative was set, and Emily felt the familiar excitement of starting something new. But this time, there was no pressure to perform or succeed at all costs. She was doing this because it was the right thing to do. The room was filled with people from her team, along with a few trusted partners who shared her passion for giving back. As she spoke about her vision for the new charitable initiative, she could see the spark in their eyes. They understood what she was trying to create, and they were eager to be a part of it. For the first time in a long time, Emily felt like everything was coming full circle. She had built a successful business, and now she was using that success to give back. The meeting was a success, and by the end of the week, she had a team in place to help launch the initiative. The next few months were spent working on the details, securing the right partnerships, and getting the word out. Emily was thrilled to see the positive response from the community. The women she had hoped to help were signing up for the mentorship program, and donations started coming in from people who believed in her cause. The impact was immediate. Young women who had been struggling to get their businesses off the ground were finding the support they needed to succeed. Emily watched as her initiative began to grow, and she couldn't help but feel proud. This was why she had started this journey. It wasn't just about building a profitable business. It was about creating a legacy of positive change. As the program expanded, Emily knew that this was just the beginning. She had a long way to go, but she was more determined than ever to make a difference. Her business continued to thrive, but now, it was about more than just financial success. It was about empowering others to reach their potential and giving back to the community that had supported her from the start. One evening, after a particularly successful event for the charity, Emily walked outside into the cool night air, reflecting on everything she had accomplished. She had built a company, yes, but she had also built something more meaningful, a platform to help others achieve their dreams. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, and it was worth more than any number on a balance sheet. She smiled to herself, knowing that she had finally found the balance she had been searching for. This wasn't just success. This was fulfillment. Months passed, and Emily's business was flourishing in ways she hadn't imagined. The charity initiative had grown even bigger than expected, with more women joining the program every week, eager to get the mentorship and support they needed. Emily had found a balance between managing her growing business and nurturing her newfound sense of purpose. Still, as the demands of both sides increased, she was constantly challenged to maintain her focus on the values that had led her to start this journey. She had built a successful company, but now, she was a part of something much bigger. One evening, as she sat at her desk, reviewing emails and planning her upcoming schedule, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Richard. "We need to talk," it read. The words sent a ripple of anxiety through her. They had talked about the business plenty of times before, but something about the message felt different. She wondered if something was wrong. She quickly texted back, agreeing to meet. The next day, they met at the same cafe where they had shared so many important conversations. Richard looked more serious than usual, his brows furrowed as he took a seat across from her. Emily could sense that this wasn't just a casual chat. "What's going on, Richard?" she asked, her voice steady but with an edge of concern. Richard exhaled deeply. "Emily, I've been thinking a lot about the business and your vision. You've done incredible things, and I'm proud of you. But we're at a crossroads." Emily felt her heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" Richard leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "The investors are starting to push for more involvement. They see the success of the business, and now they want to take it even further. They're suggesting we expand faster, but that would mean compromising some of your core principles." Emily's mind raced. She had known this day might come, but hearing it out loud made it feel too real. "What kind of compromises?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Richard hesitated, then answered, "They want us to make the business more profitable by targeting a different market, one that doesn't align with your original values. They believe it will make the company even more successful, but it comes with the risk of losing what you stand for." Emily sat back, processing his words. She had fought so hard to build something that mattered, something that was aligned with her values. The thought of changing it all for the sake of profit made her stomach churn. But at the same time, she knew the investors were right about one thing. The company was growing, and the world was watching. "What if I don't agree?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. "What happens then?" Richard gave her a long, measured look. "You could continue as is, but you'd be limited in your ability to grow. You've reached a point where expansion is inevitable, and if we don't take advantage of this moment, we might miss the opportunity." Emily's mind swirled. She had never imagined this dilemma, whether to stay true to her original mission or to take a risk and potentially change everything. She thought of the young women who had trusted her, who had come to her for help, for guidance, and for support. Could she really turn her back on them, on what she had promised them? I don't want to compromise, Emily said finally, her voice gaining strength. I built this company for a reason, and I won't sacrifice that. Not for anyone. Richard nodded, his expression softening. I knew you'd say that, and I respect it. But I also want you to consider something. Maybe there's a middle ground. You can still expand, still grow, but you can do it on your own terms. Maybe you don't have to give up your values to succeed. Emily felt a spark of hope at his words. What do you mean? She asked, her curiosity piqued. Richard smiled. What if you could reach the new market while still staying true to your mission? What if there was a way to grow your business without losing yourself? The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. Could she really do it? Could she grow her business, reach new heights, and still maintain the integrity she had fought so hard to preserve? I don't know if I can do it, Emily admitted, the weight of the decision still heavy on her shoulders. I've worked so hard to keep this true to myself. What if I fail? Richard reached across the table, his hand resting gently on hers. Failure is a part of growth. But it's not about the destination, it's about how you get there. You've already proven that you can succeed on your own terms. Now it's about finding a way to grow without losing your soul. Emily looked at Richard, her heart heavy but filled with a sense of clarity. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to let fear or doubt stop her now. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like she had the courage to face it. I'll find a way, she said quietly, her resolve firm. I won't compromise my values, but I will find a way to grow, to expand, and to make a bigger impact. Richard smiled, his eyes filled with pride. I knew you would. As Emily left the cafe that day, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just building a business. She was building a movement, a legacy that would stand the test of time. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but now, more than ever, she was ready to take it on. The future was uncertain, but she had learned that the most important thing was to stay true to herself, no matter what. As the months passed, Emily found herself standing at a crossroads once again. Her business was thriving, but now, it was time to face the new challenge she had feared. Richard had been right. There was always a way to grow without losing herself. She had spent sleepless nights, poring over strategies and brainstorming new ideas to expand the reach of her company, while keeping her core values intact. The new market was proving to be just as difficult to crack as she had feared, but she wasn't going to back down. She had a plan, and she was determined to make it work. One evening, Emily sat in her office, reviewing the new partnerships they were forging. The room was filled with papers, notes, and data, but it all felt so overwhelming. She had spent weeks crafting the perfect pitch for investors and potential partners, but now she was beginning to wonder if it was enough. Would they accept her terms? Would they see the value in what she was trying to build? Maybe I'm asking for too much, she muttered to herself. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Richard. Let's meet tomorrow. I have some news that might change things. Emily paused for a moment. She knew that Richard had always been a steady hand for her. But something in the message made her uneasy. She wasn't sure what to expect. I'll be there, she replied. The next day, Emily arrived at the cafe, her mind racing. Richard was already seated, his usual calm demeanor giving nothing away. As she sat down across from him, she could sense that something was off. What's going on, Richard? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. I've been talking to a few key people in the industry, Richard began, his voice thoughtful. And there's a shift happening. The market is changing faster than we anticipated. We need to adapt. Emily leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. What kind of shift? She asked. The investors we're dealing with have different expectations now, Richard explained. They're pushing for more aggressive growth. They want to see bigger returns, faster. They're suggesting we scale up in a way that could compromise our vision. Emily felt her stomach tighten. She had been down this road before, and she wasn't sure if she could go through it again. Are they asking us to compromise on our values? She asked. Richard nodded slowly. It's not just about the money anymore, Emily. It's about control. They want to dictate the direction, and that's something we've avoided so far. But the pressure is mounting. Emily's mind was spinning. She had worked so hard to keep the business aligned with her values, but now it seemed like everything she had built was on the verge of falling apart. So what do we do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard sighed. We have two options. We can give in and take the fast track to growth, or we can stand firm and risk losing everything we've worked for. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. She had always believed that success was about doing the right thing, not just chasing profits. But now, she had to decide if she was willing to risk it all for the sake of staying true to her principles. I don't know if I can compromise, she said softly, staring down at the table. I built this company to be different. I wanted to prove that you don't have to lose yourself to succeed. Richard's gaze softened. I know, Emily. But sometimes, the right path isn't the easiest one. If you want to keep building this business the way you envision, you'll have to take some risks. Emily sat back in her chair, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had already given so much of herself to get here. Could she really give up her values for the sake of growth? Or was there a way to have both? As she left the cafe that day, Emily felt more uncertain than ever. The path ahead was unclear, and the stakes were higher than they had ever been. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to give up on her dream. She had worked too hard to build something meaningful. The decision wouldn't be easy, but she knew that whatever choice she made, it had to be the right one for her. The next few days were filled with meetings, negotiations, and late nights spent poring over documents. Emily knew that this was the moment that would define the future of her business. But she wasn't going to let fear or pressure make the decision for her. She would stand firm, stay true to her vision, and fight for what she believed in. She had come this far, and she wasn't about to let anyone take that away from her. The days following Emily's decision were filled with a mix of anticipation and determination. She had chosen the path that aligned with her values, and now it was time to move forward, no matter how difficult the journey ahead might be. Richard had been supportive, as always, but even he could see the weight of the choice Emily had made. The pressure from investors and the market was growing, but Emily held firm. She refused to compromise the principles that had built her business. She had come too far to let that go now. As the business continued to grow, so did the challenges. Emily faced them head-on, trusting her instincts and staying true to her mission. She continued to expand the charity initiative she had started, and the mentorship program for young women became a significant success. What had started as a small idea had blossomed into something much bigger than she had imagined, and the impact was beginning to ripple out into the community. She saw women from all walks of life reaching out to her, thanking her for the opportunity to change their lives. Emily had found the balance she had been seeking. Her business was thriving, and more importantly, she was thriving, too. She had learned that success wasn't just about profits and numbers. It was about staying true to your vision, even when the world tells you to give up or change. She had not only built a company that was successful, but one that made a difference, one that stood for something bigger than just making money. One evening, as Emily was walking through her office, her eyes landed on the framed picture of the first office she had ever rented, a small, cluttered room with just a desk and a chair. She remembered the nights she spent alone, working tirelessly, unsure if her dream would ever come true. Now, years later, the office had transformed into a sleek, modern space filled with a growing team of passionate individuals. She had come a long way, but the journey was far from over. As Emily looked out the window at the city below, she realized that she had made the right choice. It hadn't been easy, but she had never been one to take the easy path. She had always believed that true success came from staying true to yourself, and now she had proven it. She had built something meaningful. She had built something that mattered. The phone on her desk buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from one of her mentors. I heard about the latest project, the message read. Incredible work. You're making a real impact, Emily. Keep pushing. Emily smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. The message reminded her of why she had started this journey, why she had pushed herself to build something that wasn't just for herself, but for others. Her mind wandered back to the many moments of doubt she had faced, the times when she thought about quitting, the times when it seemed like the path ahead was too difficult to follow. But now, standing here, looking at the life she had built, she knew it had all been worth it. Emily had proven to herself that success was possible without sacrificing who you were, without compromising your values. As the business continued to grow and new opportunities presented themselves, Emily was determined to never lose sight of the bigger picture. She would continue to help others, continue to build a legacy. that was based on something real. With a renewed sense of purpose, Emily set her phone down and looked at the city once more. There was so much more to do, so many people to help, so many lives to touch. But for the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. She had built something great, something that would last, and she knew that the future was full of even more possibilities. Emily smiled to herself, knowing that the journey wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. In this series of touching stories, follow the journey of Emily, a determined entrepreneur who started from nothing and built a successful business while staying true to her values. As she faces difficult decisions and the pressure to grow, Emily must navigate the complex world of business without compromising her principles. These touching stories highlight the challenges of balancing personal integrity with the demands of success, and how Emily learns to trust herself and her vision. Her journey is a testament to the power of staying true to one's mission, no matter the obstacles. These touching stories also explore the importance of giving back to the community, as Emily uses her success to create opportunities for others. The impact she makes through her mentorship program for young women is just one example of how her business becomes a force for good. Along the way, Emily learns that success isn't just about profits, but about making a real difference. With each decision, she continues to grow, both as a businesswoman and as a person, proving that the most touching stories are the ones that reflect our deepest values and aspirations. These touching stories are a powerful reminder that success can be achieved without losing sight of what truly matters.